All right, let's dive into one of the biggest stories happening right now, a story that's literally shaping our future. We're talking about the race to build the actual physical foundation for artificial intelligence. And the amount of money being thrown at this, well, it's so huge, it's kind of hard to even wrap your head around. So let's get into it.
So let's just put the number out there. Plain and simple. $2.5 trillion. That's not over a decade. That's the forecast for global AI spending for one single year, 2026. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. What does a number like that even mean? How do you even put that into perspective?
Okay, to give you some context, check this out. That $2.5 trillion for just 1 year of AI spending is more money than it costs to run the entire Apollo program, the project that put humans on the moon, plus the Manhattan Project, which created the atomic bomb. And that's combined and adjusted for inflation. It's just wow. That's the level of ambition we're talking about here. So the big question is, where is all that cash actually going? Let's start breaking down this absolutely massive price tag. Okay, so if you look at how the spending breaks down based on Gartner's forecast, one number just jumps right out at you. That huge 55% chunk, that's the infrastructure. Over half of all the money, we're talking $1.37 trillion, is going into just the pure physical stuff. This isn't even the fancy software or the AI services. This is the nuts and bolts, the concrete and silicon that makes it all possible. So who's writing these massive checks? Well, a gigantic slice of this pie comes from just a handful of tech giants. And they're locked in what you can really only call a high-stakes technological arms race. And that brings us to the main players in this game, the hyperscalers. It's a fancy term, but it basically means the companies running these unimaginably massive cloud computing platforms. And for our purposes, we're talking about the big four: Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Meta. And listen, when I say they're spending more on AI than most countries, that's not hyperbole. It's a fact. This is investing on a truly geopolitical scale. And just look at the scale of their individual bets for 2026 alone. It's wild. Amazon is out in front, planning to spend over $125 billion. You've got Microsoft and Google right behind them, pouring around $100 billion each into these monster projects, like Microsoft's Stargate supercomputer. This isn't just about next quarter's earnings. This is a flat-out battle for who will dominate the technology of the future. Amazon's CEO, Andy Jassy, really puts a voice to these numbers. He makes it clear this isn't some wild gamble. No, this is a calculated bet, a deep conviction that's backed by one of the biggest companies on the planet. He's anticipating a strong, long-term return, and he's putting his money where his mouth is. Okay, so we keep saying infrastructure, but what does that actually mean? What are these companies literally buying with all these billions? Let's peek under the hood. Well, it's something called the AI infrastructure stack. Think of it like a set of building blocks. At the bottom, you've got the brains of the operation, those super powerful, incredibly hard-to-get GPUs, mostly from NVIDIA. Then you have the custom-made chips, like Google's TPUs or Amazon's Trainium. But it's not just the chips, it's the real-world stuff, too. Buying up land, the actual construction of these enormous data centers, and this is a huge one, the power grids and cooling systems you need to stop the whole thing from melting. Yeah, let's actually double-click on that last part, the power. Because the sheer thirst for energy here is driving a revolution that is literally, physically changing the landscape of our world. So get that old picture of a dusty server room out of your head. That's not what we're talking about. This new generation of AI data centers, they are so enormous, so complex, and so power-hungry that people have started calling them cathedrals of compute. And honestly, the name fits. The jump in scale here is it's breathtaking. For a long time, a big data center was maybe 20 megawatts. The new standard for an AI campus, 1 gigawatt. That's 1,000 megawatts. That is a 50 times increase, a 50x jump. And it's all because training these new AI models requires a density of power that's just on another planet compared to what we needed before. And this crazy, insatiable demand for electricity is pushing these tech companies to do things they've never done before. I mean, we're now seeing companies like Microsoft striking deals to buy power directly from nuclear power plants. Think about that. They're doing it just to make sure their AI dreams have enough juice to even turn on. Okay, so we've got a spending spree of historic, maybe even unprecedented proportions. And that leads us to the one question that every investor, every analyst, everyone is asking right now. Is this a real, sustainable, historic boom? Or are we just living inside a giant bubble that's about to pop? You know, the parallels to other moments in tech history are they're impossible to ignore. If you were around in the late 90s, you've got to be feeling a serious sense of deja vu right now. So, is that what's happening? Are we just reliving the dot-com bubble all over again, but this time with AI? Let's do a real quick history lesson. Back in 2000, at the peak of the dot-com bubble, telecom companies spent billions laying down fiber optic cable that just sat empty for years after everything crashed. Fast forward to around 2010, and you see the big cloud companies like Amazon and Microsoft start their own huge build-out. And now ever since ChatGPT set off that generative spark in 2023, we have this new, even bigger surge in spending. The pattern, it feels pretty familiar, doesn't it? And this really gets to the heart of the whole debate. You've got two main camps. In one corner, you have the skeptics. They're looking at the numbers and saying, where's the return on investment? As Jim Cavello from Goldman Sachs points out, replacing cheap labor with super expensive tech is the opposite of how these things usually work. But in the other corner, you have the believers. They're all in on the Field of Dreams strategy. If you build it, they will come. The idea that you have to build the roads before people can invent the cars to drive on them. A Gartner analyst, John David Lovelock, really nails this tension. He predicts we're heading for a phase of disillusionment around 2026. He's talking about what people are now calling the ROI gap. And it's simple, really. It's the giant gap between the insane amount of money being spent right now and the actual proof that this is all going to make money down the road. But look, this story is way bigger than just a few corporate balance sheets. This massive build-out is creating the next great frontier, a new arena for global competition, and it's going to affect every single one of us. And that brings us to this really critical idea, sovereign AI. Because this isn't just a race between companies anymore. Now it's a race between countries. You have nations like France, India, and Japan pouring their own public money into building national AI systems. And you have to ask, why? Well, it's about control. It's about data privacy for sure, but maybe more importantly, it's about not being dependent on the handful of big American tech companies that currently run the show. So why does any of this matter to you? Well, because these trillions of dollars, these gigawatts of power, they aren't just for some server in a desert somewhere. This is the foundation. This is the plumbing for the next generation of everything. The tools you use at work, the apps on your phone, the scientific breakthroughs that could cure diseases, the movies you watch, the music you listen to, all of it. This infrastructure is going to touch every single part of your life. And so when you really step back and look at all this, it becomes pretty clear. The real trillion-dollar question isn't if this incredible, world-changing infrastructure is going to get used. Oh, it's going to get used. There's no doubt about that. The much, much bigger question, the one we all have to think about, is how?